as we are still getting to know one another, I begin by sharing that I have one sister. She is 2 years younger than I am, and we are very close, as are our husbands and our children. Except for our time in college together, we've never lived more than an hour apart from each other. And we don't see each other every week, but we do see each other often. We get together frequently for Shabbos dinner, or to have the kids play in the park, just for pizza. We vacation together, we do holidays together. She and her family mean the world to me. People move all the time, for jobs, for sunnier weather, for cheaper taxes. There could have been a bazillion reasons why my sister and I would separate. Perhaps it would have been easier if their family had needed to move several thousand miles away, if they were moving for a job, but that wasn't it. My sister and my brother-in-law both work remotely now. It might have been easier had they moved for the climate. Florida does have nicer weather, the recent hurricane notwithstanding. But they didn't. They moved for politics. I'm happy for them. They're happy, and that makes me happy. And I'm heartbroken because the ideological divide has taken us away from one another. Because they felt they needed, because they actually needed to socialize normally, to move from a blue state to a red state, to be with like-minded people. So they went. I miss them very much. As it turns out, my sister and her family are not the only ones making moves like these. Robert Putnam, who teaches public policy at Harvard University, presents a fascinating study in his 2020 book, The Upswing: How We Came Together a Century Ago and How We Can Do It Again. In the 1950s, Americans were asked whether they would be bothered by their son or daughter marrying a person of a different race. About 50% responded in the affirmative. They were also asked if they would be bothered by their son or daughter marrying a person who affiliated with a different political party. Only about 10% answered yes. When the same questions were posed in the 2010s, fewer than 10% said it would bother them if their child married someone of a different race, but more than 50% said it would bother them if their child married someone with opposing political views. Even as our embrace of racial diversity grows, we are growing further apart and more stiff-necked about those who hold different political opinions. Another study asked people who identified as left-wing to rate their level of sympathy for those who were right-wing and vice versa. They rated their feelings on a 100-point scale. 0 represented absolute hatred, and 100, absolute love, with 50, the lukewarm, neither love nor hatred, something in between. In 1995, the average score was 40. Republicans didn't particularly like Democrats, and Democrats didn't particularly like Republicans, but the emotional temperature was low, but far from a deep freeze. The researchers repeated their study in 2015. The average score dropped from 40 to 7. Within 20 years, Americans began to hate those who hold opposing political views. That last sentence is what got me. Americans have begun to hate those who hold opposing political views. It's written by Micah Goodman, an Israeli scholar who wrote 2 books trying to convince the Israeli public to open their minds to one another across political divide. Palestinian, Israeli, secular, religious, left-wing, right-wing. He wrote 2 books and then realized that this is not just Israel's problem. It is America's problem. And it is becoming a worldwide problem, as recent elections this week in Brazil and Italy attest. Hate? Hate? That's the word that stopped me. I don't believe in hate. We, as a Jewish community, don't believe in hate. We believe in love, in forgiveness, in compassion, in kindness, and in grace. Grace. What does that even mean? For years, my Torah study partner and I have debated this question. What is grace? What does it mean that God is gracious? And what does grace have to do with me, with any of us, this Yom Kippur? I submit that grace has everything to do with us this Yom Kippur. Let's just admit it. Grace sounds Christian. Amazing grace, how sweet it is. Grace through salvation, it is Christian, but where do you think they got it, people? We tend to embrace ahava, love, more than grace. Think about it, love, ahava, it's all over our tradition. In our Sidur, ahava, rabba, ahavtanu. God loves us with a deep, abiding love. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. In the Kiddush, we sing that God gives us love, gives us Shabbat, b'ahava, in love. In the opening of our Amidah, that first blessing, we remember God, our ancestors. God will redeem us for the sake of our ancestors, b'ahava. But as it turns out, grace in Hebrew, chen, chet, nun, chen, or chanun, grace is there too. Sim shalom, tova uvracha, chen v'chesed. Every Amidah ends with us singing a blessing for God to grant us peace, goodness, blessing, and grace. Yivarechacha Adonai v'chuneka. The middle of our blessing with which we bless our children and one another on Friday nights, on holidays, the priestly blessing, may God bless you and show you grace. And today, of all days, Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu V'anenu. Dear God, show us grace, Chanenu. Both love and grace are mainstream Jewish ideas, and we can reclaim them with authenticity. In fact, I stand here today and beg of us to reclaim grace as our prime Jewish value. So what does grace, chen, actually mean? Grace is showing someone love, kindness, compassion, even though they don't deserve it. Even though you think they don't deserve it. To live with grace is to say, I don't believe a word you say. In fact, I think you are dead wrong. In fact, I think my position is the morally superior one, and you know what? I am going to love you anyway. Grace is born of humility and resides in love. Grace is mystery and gratitude and walking through the world with an attitude of we don't know because we don't know very much. We don't know, we don't deserve what is ours, and so we love. Here is what Maimonides writes in the Guide for the Perplexed, chapter 53, about grace. The fact that there is a world at all is sheer grace. None of us ever did anything to earn the gifts of life and consciousness or the world we inhabit. The world is built on an act of grace. The world is built. The world we build will be built on our acts of grace. How might this change us? To think that love, that grace, is at the very core of who we are as Jews. How might it shape our teshuvah today on Yom Kippur? How might it shape the climate of our hearts this year? I suggest that in reclaiming grace as essential to us as Jews, that we can nurture a different heart space that will change the world. You see, we have become so confident in our own righteousness that we have become self-righteous. We live in bubbles in real life, red states and blue states, hanging out only with like-minded people, but also online. The founder of MoveOn.org, he went online recently, MoveOn.org, left-leaning democracy advocacy group, and 5 million members. He goes online because he knows that he's interested in what his right-leaning friends have to say on a given issue. He scrolls through his feed and scrolls through, and he cannot find anything, a single post, and he realizes that Facebook has examined his own preferences, and they have removed from his algorithm anything with which he disagrees. We live in our own bubbles, and so we feel our own rightness, so secure in the moral superiority of our own truths that we have become like Pharaoh. We have become hardened-hearted to those who hold different political views. I not only believe what I believe and vote how I vote, but I also cannot fathom how you face yourself in the mirror every day. And of course, this is not just political, it is personal too. How do we show grace to the people we stand in line with at the supermarket? How do we show grace to the people with whom we go to school or work, our colleagues, our friends? How do we show grace with the people we live with when they don't wash the dishes or put away the leftovers? This feels crucial to me, crucial to our own spiritual healing as well as to the healing of this country and this world. If what we do in this sanctuary together matters today, it will matter because we will have softened our hearts through grace. Perhaps this is why we sing those 13 attributes over and over again on Yom Kippur. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun. That Chanun, we sing it 3 times every service. So that's 5 services times 3 times. But we repeat it and we say it in front of the ark as well. Because God is Chanun, God is gracious. So today when we stand here fasting and connecting, we connect deeply to how much we depend on God's grace. The Talmud teaches that when we sing those words back to God, we are saying, God, you are gracious. You cannot refuse us, for we deserve nothing, but you are going to give it to us anyway. And so we remind ourselves as we sing, we who are B'Tselem Elohim, made in God's image, so too we must be gracious with one another. We must be loving. We must be compassionate. We must extend one another grace even though we do not deserve it. Grace does not reside in trying to convince other people that we are right and they are wrong. Grace does not reside in trying to understand other people's opinions, though that might help us along the way. Here is where grace resides. Grace resides inside each of us. And so I close with a story. When God was ready to create human beings on the 6th day of creation, God decided to give them a special gift. God would give each one of them nitzotzot, holy sparks of God's special goodness, of God's grace. Now, The angels, who were very close to God, heard about this and they grew jealous. They didn't want human beings to have something that they didn't have. God heard about their unhappiness and he thought it over. Finally, God said to the angels, I will make a deal with you. I will still give human beings the nitzotzot, the holy sparks of grace, but you can pick the place where I will put those sparks. You can hide them anywhere you like in the world, and that is where I will place them. So the angels had a big meeting. They all got together to decide where to put the sparks. One angel raised his hand and said, let's put them at the top of the very highest mountain. It's so steep to climb, very far up in the sky, they'll never find them. But another angel said, no. These human beings that God is going to create, they are going to have strength and perseverance. They'll work out a way to get to the top of the mountain eventually. Another angel piped up. How about if we drop the divine sparks at the bottom of the ocean? The humans aren't fish. They won't be able to hold their breath long enough to get down there. Another angel objected, God is going to give the human beings intelligence. They will figure out how to build a machine. They'll figure out how to get underwater. The ocean is not a good solution. So now the angels are starting to get frustrated. They're rejecting putting the sparks deep in the forest, desert sands. They just don't know what to do. And finally, one of the youngest angels pipes up in a quiet voice, I have an idea. Here's what we will do. We will ask God to hide the divine sparks of God's special goodness inside each human being. They will never think to look there. I am really sad that my sister moved so far away. I cannot fathom how they think about the world the way they do on so many issues. And more than that, I treasure the spark inside of her and her husband and their children, and the spark inside of me. I love the way we light each other up. Through God's grace, when we look inside, we don't find hate, we find love. Yivarechecha Adonai v'chuneka. May God bless you and grant you grace.